The Reid Technique. Developed in the 1940s, the Reid Technique is one of the most widely used interrogation methods in police history. It relies on a 9-step accusatory process designed to break down a suspect's psychological defenses. The interrogation begins with isolation in a small, sterile room to build anxiety and helplessness. When interrogators enter, they start with direct confrontation, stating that the evidence already proves your guilt. If you try to deny it, they interrupt immediately, refusing to let you build a defensive narrative. The technique creates a push and pull between maximization and minimization. Interrogators maximize danger by exaggerating the consequences of remaining silent, while minimizing moral blame by suggesting the crime was an accident or justified. They offer two choices, both implying guilt, but one framed as morally understandable. Trapped between relentless pressure and a perceived lifeline of leniency, the suspect's cognitive control erodes, often leading innocent people to make false confessions just to end the pressure. Good cop, bad cop. Good cop, bad cop relies on psychological contrast to manipulate a suspect's perception of safety. It requires two interrogators working in tandem. The bad cop takes an aggressive lead, shouting, slamming tables, invading personal space, and threatening maximum legal penalties. This triggers a fight or flight response, flooding the suspect's brain with cortisol and raising anxiety to an unsustainable level. Just as the suspect reaches a breaking point, the bad cop leaves and the good cop steps in. The good cop acts as a protector, offering water, showing sympathy, and scolding their partner for being too harsh. This dramatic shift creates an illusion of trust. Desperate to escape the threat of the bad cop, the suspect's brain instinctively latches on to the good cop as an ally, viewing a confession not as surrendering to the police, but as helping a friend who is trying to save them. The peace model. Developed in the United Kingdom as a response to miscarriages of justice, the peace model completely rejects accusatory and manipulative tactics. Peace stands for preparation, engage, account, closure, and evaluation. Instead of forcing a confession, interrogators act as a neutral fact-finders conducting an investigative interview. The process begins with thorough planning before meeting the suspect. During the interview, the investigator builds genuine rapport, explains the ground rules, and encourages the suspect to provide a complete, uninterrupted account of their actions. Rather than confronting suspects with lie detection tricks, the interviewer allows the suspect to talk freely. Once the story is recorded, the interviewer gently introduces inconsistencies between the suspect's timeline and physical evidence, asking for clarification. Because the suspect isn't placed in a panic, false confessions drop dramatically, while deceit is exposed through logical contradictions. Sleep deprivation. Sleep deprivation is an enhanced interrogation tactic designed to shatter mental resilience without leaving physical marks. The human brain relies on sleep to regulate emotional control, logical reasoning, and memory consolidation. By keeping a suspect awake for 48 to 72 consecutive hours, interrogators force the brain into severe cognitive collapse. This is achieved by constant bright lighting, frequent room changes, erratic noise, or forcing the subject to stand in uncomfortable positions. As hours turn to days, the prefrontal cortex begins to shut down. Hallucinations set in, reaction times slow to the level of severe intoxication, and short-term memory fails completely. The suspect loses the ability to evaluate risk or understand long-term consequences. In this state, the immediate desire for sleep overrides survival instincts, making the suspect willing to sign any statement or confess to crimes they never committed just to close their eyes. Cognitive interviewing. Cognitive interviewing is a specialized technique used to maximize memory retrieval and unmask skilled liars. Based on psychological principles of memory access, it works by helping the brain navigate stored information through multiple sensory pathways. The interviewer guides the subject to mentally recreate the physical and emotional environment of the event, recalling smells, weather, sounds, and feelings present at the time. To test truthfulness, the interviewer asks the subject to recount events in non-chronological order, such as backwards from the end to the beginning. Truthful memories are stored as multisensory experiences, allowing a person to move backward through the timeline cleanly. Liars, however, memorize fabricated stories sequentially. Forcing a deceptive subject to tell their story in reverse overloads their mental bandwidth, causing significant pauses, glaring contradictions, and visible stress as the fake story falls apart. Maximization and minimization. Maximization and minimization are dual psychological levers used to alter a suspect's view of their choices. Maximization involves terrifying the suspect by painting a worst-case scenario. The interrogator highlights the severity of the charges, exaggerates evidence strength, and presents a future of maximum imprisonment. This creates acute hopelessness, convincing the suspect that escaping punishment is impossible. Once the suspect is crushed by fear, minimization is introduced. The interrogator adopts an empathetic voice that downplays the moral severity of the act, offering face-saving excuses or suggesting the victim deserved it. Minimization doesn't change the legal reality of a confession, but to a terrified suspect, it makes confessing feel like a minor admission rather than a life-destroying mistake. The false evidence ploy. The false evidence ploy is a high-risk tactic where interrogators lie to a suspect about incriminating evidence. Interrogators might place a thick file folder labeled with the suspect's name on the table, present fabricated lab reports, claim surveillance footage caught them, or state that a co-conspirator has already signed a full confession. The goal is to shatter the suspect's belief that they can bluff their way out of custody. When a guilty suspect believes the state already possesses undeniable proof, their motivation to deny guilt collapses. However, this technique carries severe risks when used on vulnerable subjects. Innocent suspects can become convinced that the justice system is so rigged or the fake evidence so overwhelming that conviction is inevitable, leading them to falsely confess to secure a lighter sentence. Sensory deprivation and overload. Sensory manipulation alters a suspect's psychological baseline by controlling environmental input. Sensory deprivation involves stripping away all stimuli using blackout goggles, noise-canceling headphones, and isolated soundproof cells. Cut off from sight, sound, and touch, the brain loses its spatial anchors. Within hours, internal thoughts turn chaotic, anxiety spikes, and deep disorientation sets in. Sensory overload operates on the opposite extreme, blasting the subject with blinding strobe lights, high-decibel static noise, and rapid temperature shifts. Both methods disrupt the central nervous system's balance, eroding ego boundaries and self-identity. By destroying the suspect's sense of time, stability, and control, interrogators reduce the subject to extreme psychological dependency, making them hyper-compliant to end the torment. Pride and ego down technique. Pride and ego down is an aggressive technique designed to provoke a suspect into revealing information by attacking their self-worth and intelligence. Rather than treating the suspect as a criminal mastermind, the interrogator intentionally insults their competence, calling them sloppy, amateurish, or weak. The interrogator downplays the crime, suggesting it was so poorly executed that anyone could have done it, or claiming someone else was the real brains behind the operation. This insults the suspect's ego and triggers a defensive reaction. Suspects driven by narcissism feel an overwhelming urge to correct the interrogator's low opinion of them. To prove how smart or ruthless they actually were, the suspect begins explaining the intricate details of their plan, voluntarily handing over incriminating evidence to satisfy their need for validation. The pride and ego up technique. In direct contrast to tearing a suspect down, pride and ego up uses flattery and validation to lower a subject's defenses. Interrogators treat the suspect with respect, admiring their intellect, skill, or reputation. The interrogator frames the crime not as an evil act, but as an impressive feat of planning or courage that only someone of the suspect's extraordinary talent could pull off. By stroking the suspect's ego, the interrogator creates a permissive environment where the suspect feels understood rather than judged. The suspect, flattered by the attention, begins to view the interrogator as an equal who truly appreciates their work. Driven by vanity, the suspect opens up about their methods, motives, and achievements, confessing to details of the crime out of a desire to showcase their perceived superiority.